Well, folks, here we are again. It's time for the weekly forecast. But before we get to the main forecast, let's take a look at what's happened over the last week. And of course, last Thursday we've seen that heavy precipitation band set up over southeast Nebraska, and we've seen some scattered thunderstorm activity around the state through the early part to mid part of the week with some very warm temperatures across western Nebraska. We had 3 days of triple-digit heat with a high temperature set at McCook with 109 degrees, and of course that's increased the stress in western Nebraska, and the latest drought monitor reflects that through Tuesday morning's data. We're seeing a wide expansion of drought conditions into western Nebraska, the Sandhills, and southwest, south central Nebraska. We've seen a little bit of easing in southeast Nebraska as a reflection of the recent precip. And of course, with cold front that come through during the midweek time frame, that will probably be incorporated in next week's drought monitor. So depending on how we go with precipitation this weekend, we could see some further improvements in southeast Nebraska, but if we don't see any precipitation, we'll probably remain status quo. Let's take a look at the upper air models and see what we can expect as we move through this next 7-day period. And we'll see right now that we do have a high building back into our region. This upper air ridge is supposed to build back up into the north, and as it does, it'll push the main core of energy up around the periphery of this ridge. So for today, we do have a shot for thunderstorm activity this morning through this afternoon as we see a warm front lift back to the north, and you can see some of that energy is projected to move along the periphery of that ridge, might give some thunderstorm activity to portions of southeastern Iowa and the southern portion of the eastern Corn Belt. But overall, temperatures are going to boost right up into the low 90s across the east, and we should see an isolated 100 to maybe 103 degree reading across the southwest. And as we go to tomorrow, what we are going to notice is that that ridge really builds in, and we're going to see some very hot temperatures. And it doesn't look like much in the way of any significant moisture within the state of Nebraska. We'll be looking at highs in the mid-90s east to possibly up to 105 degrees in the southwest. As we go into Monday, we will see the ridge starting to try to slide a little bit to our south as we have a trough moving into the Pacific Northwest. And so we will still see temperatures that might lower into the low 90s across the northeast. And we may be looking at, again, 100 to 105 across western Nebraska, particularly the Panhandle and the southwest. And we may actually generate a thunderstorm isolated in nature as it runs around the periphery of the upper portion of this ridge. Now, as we go into Tuesday, we start to see the ridge still firmly in place. Western Nebraska looks like it's going to be under the gun for heat. We'll be looking at highs in the upper 80s across the east, and maybe a chance of a thunderstorm sliding around the periphery of this ridge. We'll be looking at highs right around 100 across the west. As we go into Wednesday, the ridge is still in place. We're going to see some very warm conditions, highs in the mid-90s across the east to possibly 105 once again in portions of western Nebraska. As we go into Thursday, we start to see that the ridge tempers down. We get a chance for precipitation starting to develop. We'll look at highs in the upper 80s to the north, the upper 90s across the south. And by Friday, we see the wave pushing down a little bit farther, so a little bit cooler temperatures, highs in the low 80s north, the upper 80s south. 8 to 14-day forecast shows an increasing chance for above normal temperatures, and in regards to precipitation, there is a chance we'll see precipitation on the uptake across northern Nebraska.